On October 8, 2018, Hurricane Michael underwent a 48-hour rapid intensification period where it went from a Category 1 hurricane to a Category 4 hurricane. By landfall on October 10, 2018 at 12:30 p.m. Central Time, Hurricane Michael was an unprecedented for the region Category 5 hurricane, making landfall near Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida. Hurricane Michael was the strongest hurricane in recorded history to make landfall on the Florida Panhandle. Landing with sustained winds of 161 miles per hour and a minimum pressure of 919 millibars, the storm was the fourth most powerful hurricane to hit the United States, spreading devastation far inland through many counties in northwestern Florida, from Bay County, Gulf County, Calhoun County, even through Jackson County and Leon County, where the state capital is located. Hurricane Michael was unique in that it maintained its major hurricane status all the way through the Florida-Georgia state line. As it entered Seminole County, Georgia, it was still a strong Category 3 hurricane. Across northwestern Florida and into the state of Georgia, Hurricane Michael was responsible for $25 billion in damages. These are the 31 voices of Hurricane Michael, representing the many unique experiences and perspectives of the community members who endured the storm and its impacts. Voices of hope, empathy, pain, lessons learned, grit, determination, and extensive insight into one of the most catastrophic hurricane seasons the Florida Panhandle has ever encountered. I'm meteorologist Melissa Thomas, and allow me to introduce you to
Good morning. I'm meteorologist Melissa Thomas, here with Rachel Cooper.
Hi.
An actual hometown friend of mine. We went to high school together. And she's here this morning to help us with the project Hurricane Michael's Voice, to let us in on the experience that she had to use her voice to share what Hurricane Michael was like before, after, and the recovery leading up to the anniversary of Hurricane Michael this October 2019. Now, Rachel, Hurricane Michael landed October 10th, 2018, almost a year ago.
It's hard to believe it's been almost a year. And sometimes it feels like it's been so much longer, but at other times it's like it just happened. Especially over in Callaway, where so much of the destruction is still sitting there like it was weeks past the hurricane.
I actually live in Callaway myself, so I'm very familiar with the scenery that is still just prevalent throughout Bay County and surrounding counties, not just Bay County, but Bay County is what we're going to focus on throughout Project Hurricane Michael. Unless the surrounding county citizens might come and help us out. But let's start with Bay County today with Rachel. And one question I want to lead with is, how did Panama City feel like home to you to begin with?
So I was actually born out on Tyndall, the Air Force Base here. I was actually one of the last babies to be born out there on the base before they closed the maternity ward. So I've always grown up here, and it's always been home.
Yeah.
It helps that I have a set of grandparents that lived here my whole life, and it's been almost 29 years that I've lived here. So.
Yeah, and you graduated from Rutherford.
Yes, I did.
As well. And you've weathered some storms then. You've had some storms in the area.
The only hurricane that my family and I have ever really evacuated for was Opal, back when I was a child. And as far as we got was just over into the Gulf County line to Weewa, where we ended up staying with my great aunt and uncle and their kids in a very small house. Yeah. And there was 6 of us in my family, along with 2 dogs and a cat.
So you went a little further inland, and
yes.
With that storm, that was a smart thing to do.
Unfortunately, that was as far as we got, because before it really hit, and we had hit the county line when my dad saw a sign, or we just hit, I think it was the city limit of Weewa, when he saw one of the street signs go flying past in front of the car, and he's like, we got to stop.
It's time to stop. I understand that. And even with Hurricane Michael, with this storm, I mean,
Yeah.
so far inland, the destruction that this particular
Yeah.
storm brought forth. But this storm, you did not go so far inland.
No, because I had weathered a couple of, I had weathered the last Category 3 storm that we'd had hit in that house, and I figured it was solid brick. We had hurricane shutters, we had hurricane ties on the roof.
Yeah.
We should be good. My dad was helping me prepare things since he was no longer working in state.
Yeah. Now, leading up to that particular storm with the hurricane season 2018, would you say you felt prepared?
Yes, I actually did. I had gas, I had water, I had food, I had the generator gassed up and ready to go. I thought I was physically prepared. Everything at my house, my grandmother's house, were put away or tied down, and I thought really that I was good to go. And as I was watching the storm get closer, I realized that maybe I shouldn't have stayed. But by that point, it was too late.
And you were not the only one with that particular storm. There was definitely talk about it as it was brewing, and there was advisories being laid out. But the vast majority of people still felt like it relatively snuck up on them in the intensity and as quickly as it intensified. And you were not the only one that felt that way.
It really did.
So the storm's moving in. Maybe what was your experience through the storm immediately through it?
And so I was just kind of sitting on my front porch for probably the first few bands of it during the tropical storm portion. And I'm just, just kind of watching it, just enjoying the rain and the wind and the coolness. And then as the wind started picking up, I was like, okay, I need to go inside. By this point, the electricity had been cut. So we had no power. So I was just like, okay, I started bringing in some buckets of water from our pool just in case I have to flush the toilet.
Yeah, smart thinking.
So I was like, okay, prepared for all of that. And then the wind kept picking up, and I'm watching it through our hurricane shutters, and because the downstairs ones were clear. And I'm watching the trees start swaying really hard back and forth, almost to the point where they were almost flat on the ground swaying. And I realized that this was getting pretty intense.
And I tried on the first level at this
yes,
point.
At this point I was on the first level. And I'm trying to distract my dog because she has storm anxiety, which is, the hurricane has made it so much worse. But yeah, so I'm trying to watch and just try and distract her. And I'm also checking on the weather through my phone.
And at this point, you still have...
Yeah, at this point, I still had it.
Service on your phone to check the live radars and feeds and advisories.
And it was closer to just before the eye really fully hit was when we started losing phone signal. And then all of a sudden, I went down to maybe like 1 or 2 bars of phone signal. And then all of a sudden, it was just nothing.
Gone.
And I was just like, oh, crap. This is the first time this has ever happened. And I was like, all right, well, maybe it's just because, the generators have went out. And so try not to think too much about it. And then, so I knew like there was some destruction outside the house. So by this point, the eye has come over. I'm like, okay, go outside, let my dog out so she can use the bathroom.
Calmer.
And it's calm. There's still a little bit of wind, but not nearly enough. Well, it's not really gone.
Yeah, it's quieted down a little bit, but you can tell it's out there.
Yeah, and like I try to look up, and it's just all gray skies, all gray. There was no blue sky, nothing. And where I live across the bay from Tyndall, so I knew that if this is how it was for us, I could only imagine how it was over there.
Yeah, very close to Tyndall Air Force Base then.
Yes, and so.
So you're letting your dog use the restroom.
Yes.
You're getting the potty break in what would eventually be a Category 5 hurricane, and it's just you and your dog. And you even took a picture of your home, correct?
Yes.
At that time.
I took some pictures of the damage, so that way I could be like, okay, this is the damage so I could send them to my parents when we had signal again. And probably within maybe 20, 25 minutes of us being outside, going outside, taking pictures, just kind of trying to take stock of everything, checking on the few neighbors that I have within the immediate area. And then the wind started picking up really bad, and it was just howling. And we just all went, well, it's time for round two. And we all scattered back to our houses and kind of buckled down. And it started getting really intense. And then I was just like, okay, I need to get my cats from being upstairs downstairs with me. And I went to go chase after them because, of course, they don't want to be caught.
Yes, they're not hanging out
there.
And
they ended up bolting into my bedroom, which saved their lives.
Yeah. And this is the second.
Yes,
second
and by
floor.
So I'm in the loft area, which is also my mom's sewing room. And because we have cathedral ceilings, I am trying to get the cats, and they're doing everything in their power to evade me.
Yeah.
And so
cats are invulnerable.
Yes, and they are so ninjas too when they want to be. So I kind of hear this thudding noise, and I look over, and I can see daylight, darkness, and I realize that the edge of the roof is lifting up and thudding, and I'm like, oh shit, I need to get downstairs now. The roof's about to go. And I'm shoving my dog, who is 75 pounds at this point, in front of me, making her go down the stairs. And we hit the hallway. And moments, within mere milliseconds later, the roof just completely got ripped off.
I cannot imagine that.
It was terrifying. And the suction from the roof being pulled off, and then I was having trouble shoving her down the hallway to the bathroom. And then probably once I got her in the bathroom, it was a little bit less suction. I threw her in the bathtub, and then probably within seconds later, the glass, the bottom pane of the window in the room that was next to us fell in. My poor rabbit. It fell into his container.
On the rabbit.
He was luckily in his little hutch that I had made, kind of burrow area, so it didn't land on top of him. Yeah. But it was all in his area.
Yeah, yeah.
So
you're hunkered down at this point, in between, you said, the toilet and a wall.
Yeah. So my dog was in the bathroom, or in the toilet, in the tub, and I wedged myself, bracing my feet against the toilet, and had my back braced against the wall, and I'm just feeling the wall just shudder. But when that bottom pane of glass got pulled in, it actually lessened the suction in the house so much that it was so much easier. I felt like I could breathe again.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, it was 1,000-pound weight on your chest trying to breathe.
Really?
Yeah, and it was the suction. It was making fighting for air. My ears are just popping, crackling, and at one point I thought I had rebust my eardrum because I had busted a couple years prior. And I was just like, oh, great. That's just something else I'm going to have to deal with. And then once that pressure was released, it was easier to breathe. I could actually hear again.
Yeah.
And I could only imagine what it was like for my dog, who had no really understanding what was going on.
Don't you wish sometimes you could just have a little time period where they could understand a little bit of English just to explain what they're about to go through? But it sounds like you were really there for them the entire time.
I was trying to be.
A woman and her dog.
Yeah. And so at that point, I kind of peeked my head out of the bathroom door, and I looked down the hallway, and I could just see daylight in the dining room.
Where
and I was just, right, exactly, where there shouldn't be bright daylight. And I was just like, well, the roof is gone.
Yeah.
And kind of stuck my head back in and was just praying and trying to summon all the inner strength I could, and I knew it was going to be rough when the hurricane finally did pass.
Yeah.
And I was trying to
now, how long would you say that you were in the hunker down mode until the intensity of the storm allowed you to actually get up and survey the
so from the time I hunkered down in the bathroom until I was actually I was more sure the hurricane had ended or passed, it was probably about 3 hours. And it seemed like it just stretched on.
Yeah, I'm sure. And probably in that 3 hours did not feel like 3 hours.
No, it didn't.
It probably felt
And the whole entire time I'm praying, I'm trying to like distract my dog and distract myself, and like I was like trying to play music on my phone while trying to also conserve battery at the same time, just to try and calm her down.
Just smart. That's very
because
smart.
I've learned that
anything to
kind
ground
of
you in that moment.
more older country music seems to calm her down.
Yeah.
Like I don't know why,
Yeah.
but it does. And so I was playing some older country that I had on my phone, and it seemed to like help calm her down a little bit, and it calmed me down as well.
I'm sure. Just give you a little bit, even though that probably felt light years away from you, a little bit of normalcy.
It did.
This is what we're holding on for.
Yes.
So the storm passes, and now, I mean,
I make sure that she's good, and I tell her, to stay in the bathroom, because I didn't know what kind of destruction I was walking out into. And so I end up pulling on my rain slickers that I tossed in the bathroom before the storm. And so,
did you ever imagine having to use those?
no, I didn't. Like, I was just, but when I realized
you
that,
had them there ready.
yes.
Wow.
So I put them on, and I start walking out, and the dining room is just flooded with water from the roof being ripped off and everything. And I just peek into the living room, and it's just destroyed. There's insulation, drywall, like half the stuff that was upstairs was now downstairs. Our TV was face down in the living room. Everything was just tossed up on end.
Yeah. And I'm sure in that moment, it feels like another planet.
It really did.
It did not feel like you're home.
No, it didn't. It felt like some parallel universe that everything had been destroyed. And the only way I could kind of think of it was the fact that kind of like when you have like a snow globe and you kind of like shake it, and then after everything kind of settles down, everything is kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it felt like. And I ended up going outside because I was like, okay, well, the roof's gone. How bad is it? And I walk around the back side of the house, and I just see that the wall that was kind of in the loft area was just completely pushed down and over. And then I kind of came around the back side of the house to the side, and I realized that wall upstairs was just completely gone, and it was just on the ground, and everything, our family photos, everything that was upstairs along that wall was down on the ground and just scattered and mixed in with the brick and the drywall and everything. And then I look over to our neighbor's house, which was thankfully empty, and their garage is completely flat on the ground. And the side of their house that was facing our house is just completely gone. And I was just like, oh my word. And then I kind of go out a little bit further, and I see the front of the house, and then I see the fact that the roof was just flat on the ground on top of what was our porch and everything. And then I was just like, I let myself have like a few just gut-wrenching, bawling, like anxiety, panic attack filled moments. And then I realized that, you know what? Crying's not going to get anything done. So basically I wiped off my face, and I started trying to pick up the loose pictures that I could. I went ahead and I just went into.
You could say you steeled yourself.
Yeah.
And you adapted in that moment.
As
it was step one.
So my family would say I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, and I had to keep going.
That sounds like you did your rain bootstraps.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
And so I started picking up what loose pictures that had come out. I picked up the ones that I could find.
Yeah.
And then I stuck those actually in one of the cars. And then I was like, okay, well, it's not much else I can do by myself here. And then I went across the street and started checking on my neighbors. Thankfully, one of the older ladies out there her daughter works at Bay Medical.
Okay.
And so the mother, she's older, she uses a walker. And so I was so worried that she had been there during the storm. Thankfully, her daughter had taken her with her to work.
Oh.
And which was a good thing because probably it was 80-foot oak and an 80-foot pine had completely landed in her roof. And they just where her living room was and where her garage was just completely destroyed. And I was just like, oh my word, if she had been there.
Yeah.
And then I went to the house on the other side of the empty house, and I was checking on them because their roof had went off during the first half, and they tried to evacuate during the eye. And
During
they ended
the
up,
storm,
yep,
they tried
because
to evacuate.
they had no choice because their whole entire roof was
I
gone.
cannot imagine.
And so they were in their car, ended up having to ride out the second half in their car, and then it got pushed into the ditch in front of their house. So it was nose down in the ditch, and they had to weather the storm in their car watching everything.
That is just...
And the kids they were probably middle school, young high school age.
Yeah.
And so it had to have been terrifying for them watching it all.
That is not the first family that I've heard that in the moment of the storm, when their shelter loses its stability and they are forced to flee, and they flee, to the closest, safest spot they could find, and that was their vehicles. I mean, I heard of multiple families actually having to do this in the middle of the storm. It's actually not suggested to leave your current sanctuary for a vehicle, but in this case, these houses that were just being from the inside out imploded, your vehicle was the place to go, and that was, where you hid and you rode the rest of that storm out.
When that seems like the best option at the time, you have to do it.
Your neighbors were one of those families.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you can't wrap your head around it. You can't. So
I really can't.
Is that the first contact you made was with that particular family?
So the first contact I made was with my neighbors across the street from me, and then checked on them, made sure they were okay. And then from there, I went down and I checked on that family. And then after that, I started pulling out a chainsaw and gas and oil, so that way I could, start clearing some trees. And everybody else seemed to start coming out and checking on their surroundings. And then they started doing the same thing because being out there, there was one way in, one way out. So if we didn't clear it, we didn't know how long it would take for any kind of emergency crews to come in.
It's a slightly rural area on the outskirts of Panama City.
It is.
Yeah. So you were relatively, even in Panama City proper, help was for a particular time being not coming or going.
No.
Even first aid and emergency services were shut down to the worst that it was over.
Yeah.
So people in town weren't even getting help. You're on the outskirts.
We didn't know when
help was going to be arriving.
And all we knew was that if we needed an emergency crew, that we would have to make a way for them to be able to get in.
Smart.
And since thankfully most of the people out there own trucks or four-wheelers or something, so we were able to kind of all band together, load it up, and we used what we had. If somebody ran out of gas, somebody else was lending them some of theirs for chainsaws and everything. And a lot of the kids and women were out there with the rakes, raking or trying to get the smaller branches, while a lot of the guys were cutting down the trees. And somebody was even going along with a cutter and was cutting the power lines just so we could cross the roads, because we knew that power was out, so the lines were dead.
Yeah. So you had everybody with a pair of hands helping.
Oh,
out.
yes.
Even the children, the women, everybody was banding together to
oh, yes.
make way for recovery.
Oh,
right
yes.
out the gate.
Because we had to, because there was no use just sitting around and waiting because we didn't know when it would be.
Yeah.
And we ended up going all the way to Highway 22. So because the Cooks Bayou Bridge is out, so we had to go down 2297 to Old Allington and make our way that way to 22. And
So you're
we
cutting
started
your own like detours, your paths to
yes, because
gain access to the rest of the
because the
community.
bridge was out before the storm.
Yeah.
And so we were like, well, we got to, make a way. So we ended up doing that. We ignored curfew. We were like, all right, we got headlights. We're good. We got to get this done.
Keep working. Yeah.
We ended up completely stopping at 22, or just before 22 at probably about 2 a.m. And then we're like, you know what? Let's go home, get some rest and start, picking up again in the morning.
So how long did the process take before, well, for you in particular, you're working with your neighbors. It's
Yes.
you and your dog. Your family's out of town.
Mm-hmm.
How long are you working with your neighbors to clear travel routes before you get in touch with your family?
It was probably about maybe 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then we finally found somebody that had a cricket phone. And they had just enough signal that people could call out. And so they were going around and letting people call their loved ones. And I was able to get a hold of my mom.
Because at this time, the services like Verizon, and
Verizon,
AT&T,
AT&T, everybody's down.
But the little cricket phone is getting word to family out of town. That is amazing.
And so I was able to let them know, hey, I'm borrowing somebody's phone. I'm okay. The house is a total loss, but I'm okay. And my mom asked me if I could call my grandmother because she has an AT&T landline, which runs underground. So they had borrowed a non-powered phone, a kind of an old style, kind of rotary phone. And she was able to get phone calls.
Okay.
And so I was able to get in touch with my grandmother and let her know, hey, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'll end up coming up as soon as we can get the roads cleared, and I'll be staying there. And she was just so glad that
and she's
we
a little
survived.
bit further into Panama City?
She is. She's off of Cherry Street.
Okay, in Callaway area.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay.
And so her house had some damage, but it was pretty much untouched, whereas just a couple houses down for her, houses were completely destroyed.
Yes. So what has recovery been like the past? I mean, we're coming up on a year is the anniversary. The whole reason we're doing these interviews, and then
it's been hell, like honestly, and then trying to find people who will do the work and actually do it correctly, and not charge you basically outrageous inflated prices. It's been so hard, and then just like, especially with
you started having to coordinate that and formulate your recovery plan like right out the gate. And so a couple months into the new normal, you're reaching out to your insurance.
Actually on the drive back to Panama City, because since Mom was visiting my dad out of state, she was actually already contacting our homeowners insurance, and she was going ahead and like filling out stuff for FEMA, and for not just for us but for my grandmother as well, because she didn't know what she was going to be walking into, but she wanted to go ahead and have that stuff processed, because she knew that once she got here there was no internet, no cell phone signal, nothing. So she needed to know that that things need to get done.
Yeah. Now your parents come back into town, and we were looking at pictures earlier, and one of the things that stood out to me was while the people are cleaning and the crews are trying to put your neighborhood back together, I noticed a really cool system that your dad had hooked up.
Yeah, he called it his redneck engineering, but because he did 20 years active duty Air Force, he knew that certain things had to be rigged up. Well, because the generator was still there at the house, he ended up he had brought in line so that way he could end up actually doing something like this and hook up the house well to the generator so that way we could have a shower of sorts. It was a freezing cold shower because it's spring fed. It was spring fed, so it was freezing cold shower. But actually being able to take one after, by this point, it was probably about a week of not having one except for baby wipes. It felt amazing no matter how cold it was.
And that's how massive the storm was and its immediate after effects. I mean, it's a week that for, a minimum for most people and much longer for a lot of people, that you're cut off from like modern conveniences that you don't realize.
You don't realize how much you enjoy these things until all of a sudden you can't use them anymore.
But it sounds like you were surrounded by people that were creative in the moment and had experience.
Having since majority of my family is or was military, so they used that learning that they learned from just from their time in the service to help so much of our family, but also our neighbors. And because while we had showers, my dad was letting our neighbors come and rinse off and get clean water, and just was being so helpful and generous, because my dad is of the mindset of, well, if I don't help you, who will?
And I don't think that the recovery could have even gotten off the ground without families and fathers like yours. I mean, just priceless.
And we also, so my brother-in-law and my oldest nephew came in, and they brought in another generator that we gave to somebody that needed it.
So now you have family coming in town with resources.
Yes. So my brother-in-law and my nephew, or my brother-in-law and my nephew came in probably about a day or so after my dad and my mom did. And they had a small U-Haul trailer that was loaded with gas cans that they filled up over in Crestview, and just supplies and just like little things like that they thought,
to help.
And then my cousin from Plano came in, so he drove all the way from Texas as well, which my nephew and my brother-in-law did. And then probably about this time, my uncle was flown in from England to help.
From England?
Yes, from England. So he is
internationalist.
Yes, yes, pretty much. And then my brother, who is living and working in Arizona, ended up driving in about a week or so later, and one of his best friends from Arkansas ended up driving down, giving up his hunting time to come down and help us. And all these men all have, prior military experience and everything. And
so they're bringing the knowledge.
Oh, yes, they were bringing the knowledge and having to survive and how to engineer things that in a normal society be like, that's kind of sketchy. But in this kind of a situation, it works, it gets it done. We're going to go with it.
So you got through the first couple of weeks and a couple of months.
Yeah.
And you're utilizing what your family has learned to survive out the gate.
Yes.
Your family is starting to coordinate the various insurances and societal recovery that it's going to take financially to put yourself together. And then the new normal begins for you throughout just the year, the months that start to flow in. How was that?
It's definitely hard. We just kind of have to take it one day at a time and just take it as how the cards we get dealt with.
What would you say has helped you cope with everything as best as you can emotionally? Is there anything that stands out to your mind that has seen you through some of your darker days?
Knowing that I'm not alone in this has really helped, and just having my friends and my family to be there for me to talk to. And just, my dad has helped a lot because he does have PTSD from serving. And so me just being able to talk to him about what I went through and the PTSD that
the trauma
just the trauma and everything, and has helped me a lot. Not gonna lie, for the first couple months after the hurricane, I was drinking more than I should have been, just so that way I could get a night of sleep without the nightmares and everything. And then I talked to my neurologist, and he ended up giving me something that would let me sleep and not have dreams. And so I've been dealing with that. And hopefully, eventually, I'll be able to kind of wean myself off of that medicine.
Has the medicine helped? Are you still experiencing dreams to this day? Close to
not so much because of the medicine. And also, I've also started doing more things. Like I've started going more to the gym and just trying to exercise. So that way, when I do go to bed at night, I'm so exhausted that I just kind of collapse, and then I wake up the next morning and do it all over again.
That is smart. So, but you were having dreams. I mean, this is something that it doesn't. When the storm's over, it doesn't necessarily mean the storm is over.
Yeah.
And
physically outside, the storm is over, but mentally inside, it's not.
May not be over, and it's so good to hear that you sought help, that you sought, you sought a way to alleviate the symptoms you were feeling instead of just bottling it up, instead of continuing to just solely treat it with drinking, which is a calming mechanism in its own right. But
it is
the help that you sought. That's very powerful, and I really hope many more people are doing the same thing and reaching out.
I really hope
so.
Hopefully
these interviews, if they haven't, maybe these interviews and hearing other people go through similar things and who did get help will help them to reach out for that helping hands.
And I know that I need to actually see a psychologist or a therapist for what I went through. But for current time period,
it's just
I'm just trying to do one day at a time, one foot in front of the other.
Was there a moment in the past year during the new normal, you felt a little more grounded, maybe a light at the end of the tunnel? When did you feel like, and maybe happy? That's actually a good question. We're only a year out from the storm almost.
So I definitely got some closure when they were demolishing the house. I actually went out there while they were doing it and just watching it, and and the structural engineer actually talked to me and said that if the storm had actually lasted longer or had moved even a little bit slower, that the house would have collapsed on top of me. And then watching it being torn down and realizing that chapter of my life is closed it was kind of putting a soothing ointment on a wound kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because before that, every time I went out there to try and salvage any little piece that I could, it was like ripping the Band-Aid right off a wound that's trying to heal.
I'm just in awe at everything you went through with where you were hiding, the fact that could have fallen around you, what you went through after that, your family coming together as they did, and sharing that seeing it demolished actually being a cathartic moment for you. I mean, I think that's very powerful, and maybe there are some people out there that when they get to that moment, it might help them and be their light at the end of the tunnel as well.
I really hope so.
So what is your hope for the future? What do you feel? What do you see for Panama City, your home? What do you aspire for in the new norm? Because it will never be what it was before. But
we've come out a lot stronger than what we were before the storm. Yeah. And I know that it will continue to help us build and just get even more stronger as the days and the months go by. And it's going to take a while for us to get to where we were before the storm. But when we do get there, we'll be a lot stronger.
Well, it sounds like with you and families like you, we'll get there in no time. I mean, it will be a long time, but it will be with families like you that we get there.
Yeah.
Like your family. But thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us.
No problem.
And like I said, I really, really, really hope the ambition for this project is that families in the future that go through such a disaster on such a massive scale, when they're coming out of their rubble and they're sorting through their feelings, they're sorting through their experience, these voices, Hurricane Michael's voice, and this is the voice of Hurricane Michael, they'll have something to identify with. And I really appreciate you coming out and
It's
doing
not a
this
problem.
today.
I'm glad I could do it.